This is an overview video on how to answer question 2 on paper 1, section A. We'll look at what the examiner will be expecting and what you can do to score as many marks as you can. The question will always look like this. It will give you two sources, so source A and source B, and then ask how useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into something. Explain your answer using sources A and B and your knowledge of the historical context. 8 marks. All 8 marks here are available for AO3, which is your analysis and evaluation of source utility. Essentially, you need to decide how useful is source A and how useful is source B, with a focus on the inquiry given to you in the question. The sources could either be written or visual, but at least one will always be written. They will also give you some information on provenance so that you can better assess the utility. You could also bring in some contextual knowledge to try and help you to make your points, but if you do, just try and keep it relevant and focus on the question. Essentially, the task for this question is to assess the strengths and the weaknesses of each source. Now, you don't need to compare them, you don't need to decide which is more valuable. You can actually treat them separately if you want to. The highest marking responses for this question will assess at least one of the following: accuracy, reliability, limitations, knowledge of the author, or valuable information offered by the source. Now, evaluate is the key word here, not an assertion. So you can't just say this source is accurate or this source is reliable. You need to think, well, why is it accurate? Why is it reliable? Why does it matter that they're accurate and reliable in relation to the inquiry given to me in the question? The 3 main points of your answer should be thinking about content, so what's actually in the source, context, so what you already know about the source, maybe your existing knowledge, and the provenance, which they should tell you above the source. You should use all of that information to decide how useful it is for your inquiry. These are the bands for this question. So generally speaking, to score highly, you need to have developed points. So as I was saying a minute ago, not just making statements, but making points that you've explained fully, showing that you've thought carefully about the sources and what they get across. Really, you're trying to use all the information available to you, so your existing knowledge, what you're told in the source and what you're told in the question, to make a judgment and show that you've really thought about that judgment, show that you've got a really good understanding of the topic, and as a result can make a justified explanation of how useful that source is for that particular inquiry. Now let's see all of that put into action. This is an example taken from the Whitechapel option, and it tells you to study sources A and B. How useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into attitudes towards the police in Whitechapel in 1888? Explain your answer using sources A and B and your knowledge of the historical context. 8 marks. And this is the mark scheme for that question. Now, as you can see, the examiner will be assessing you on those 3 main points of content, provenance, and historical context. So you need to think about utility according to those 3 main points. So let's have a look at some examples then. When addressing the content, you can think about, for example, that the source shows criminals hiding from the police, and that suggests there is a popular belief that the police were incompetent. Then, if you wanted to make a point about provenance, you could say that it was printed in a satirical magazine, which was intended to make fun of the police and entertain readers, rather than inform them of the reality. An example of a point you can make about historical context could be that you know that policing in Whitechapel became more visible with the introduction of beat constables, and the obvious precedence of those was intended to deter criminality. The hiding criminals in the source might suggest that this wasn't particularly effective. So you can see that we've framed our answer according to content, provenance, and context. And that's a really good structure to make sure that you've addressed all the key features that the examiner needs you to in order to score you as highly as possible.